We grow when we give.
We grow when we give.
We grow when we give.
Nosotros crecemos cuando damos.
We grow when we give.
Давайте и дастся вам.
与えるとき成長する.
We grow when we give.
Welcome to R.O.G, Return on Generosity. I'm your host, Shannon Cassidy. This podcast celebrates generosity at work, not financial giving valuable time, mutual respect, alternative perspectives, and genuine collaboration. Our special guest today is Frank Gregory, social intelligence professional at Nestle USA. After starting his career in marketing, strategy, and research, Frank has specialized in social listening and related social research methodologies for the past 11 years. He's become a recognized leader in the emerging social intelligence space. Due to his accomplishments building out these capabilities for brands such as Audi, Hilton, and now Nestle USA, as well as founding the social intelligence practices at agencies such as MediaCom and consultancies such as NorthStar Solutions Group, Frank has recently been twice recognized by the Social Intelligence Lab, this leading global trade organization in the space, as a Global Social Intelligence Insider 50 award winner in both 2022 and 2024. What I appreciate most about you, Frank, is your approachability. We met at a research conference recently, and I appreciate your warmth and friendliness. Welcome to R.O.G, Frank.
Thank you so much, Shannon. It's really great to be here. I appreciate it.
It's great to have you here, and I'm dying to hear more about what you do. I saw your presentation. It was so inspiring and intriguing. So why don't we start with a little bit of your background?
Sure, absolutely. So I am from Virginia. I've lived in Virginia the majority of my life. I went to Virginia Tech for my undergrad, and then went to VCU at a grad program called Brand Center. Most people that go to VCU Brand Center end up working for ad agencies, either in a strategy role, or they become a copywriter or an art director, and they're working on big TV campaigns and things like that. I took a little bit of a different approach. Leaving VCU, I went up to New York and started working for agencies in the strategic planning roles. But I kind of just was hand raising every time that there was some research that needs to be done, right? A survey or a focus group or whatever it might be. I just started wanting to get to know the consumers a little bit more so I could inform my strategies for upcoming campaigns. And so I did that for the first few years of my career up in New York, came back to the DC area. At that point, the daily deal industry was really big. Groupon and Living Social and all those. Living Social was in need of a consumer insights lead. And so I jumped in there and led that team for a little while, doing more traditional research, surveys and brand trackers and focus groups, things like that. And then I saw the world kind of pivoting and shifting more and more towards digital and social. And so I was looking for my next opportunity, got a chance to work on the Audi brand first within this new thing called social listening, and built out their social listening capabilities. And then from there, just have seen the industry really grow and grow and grow into not just social listening, but also social intelligence and all the additional tools in the space. And so I kind of specialized in an area I wasn't expecting because social media was barely a thing when I was back studying in grad school. And so, yeah, it's I pivoted and I love what I do.
That's incredible. And how did you get into this kind of work? And then for our listeners who are thinking, I don't even know what social intelligence means, we're going to get there. But I'm just curious to know what led you to this space.
Yeah. So actually, talk about return on generosity. I actually was able to join this social listening world mostly because of a friend taking a shot on me. One of my colleagues from VCU that I went to school with for 2 years, he had gone into, he was rising the ranks in the ad agency world. And he was at a social media agency that had Audi as a client and Audi of America. And so Audi is based in the Virginia area. They were looking for someone to help build out the social measurement and this new social listening capability. And They didn't really know what exactly they needed. Joe and his team, that were all social strategists and copywriters, they didn't necessarily know exactly what social listening was, but they just said it's this new ability to start to listen to the conversations and then do research on those conversations to be able to ultimately provide insight to a brand and on how their content's performing, et cetera. And he knew I was looking for a new role. And he said, hey, do you want to sit in-house at Audi as a member of our team and build out this new capability? And I said, what exactly is it? And he said, we don't really know what it is. It's pretty brand new. It's, these tools have just been just started. And I said, well, I don't have a lot of experience specifically in these tools. I know how to conduct research. I know how to turn that research into strategy, but I haven't done this specifically. And he said, it's okay. You're a smart guy. We work well together. Give it a shot. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And so the rest is history. If he hadn't have taken a shot on me, I would not be where I am today, years later, kind of specializing in this space that I just fell in love with immediately.
Unbelievable. What an amazing generosity story. And here you are 12 years later, an expert in social listening and the social intelligence space. And because Joe took a chance on you, here we are. That's such a great story. Thanks for sharing that with us. So to back up a little bit, for those who are thinking, I've heard this phrase before and I just want to know more about it, or some might think they've never heard of it before. We might be thinking about social intelligence like emotional intelligence. But for social intelligence, I've learned from you that it includes things like social listening, social audience segmentation, social community analysis, and social content performance analytics. How do you define social intelligence and why do companies need it?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're absolutely right. There's a completely different term or phrase of social intelligence that is related to emotional intelligence and having, understanding social awareness and social cues and things like that, that every human being needs and a lot is really seen as a great quality for leaders. Social intelligence in this space is social media intelligence. It's a relatively new phrase because it's a relatively new concept. Social listening was the first set of technology capabilities in the space. So after social media was first started back in the MySpace days, and then Facebook became the huge giant that it is. People started to say, okay, well, how can we do research based on the conversations that are happening on these different social channels? And so really it was, Facebook it's intended to be all about you're posting for your friends to be able to see something. So Facebook intentionally and correctly is more closed off to social research tools, social listening tools. It's more about once Twitter happened. Once Twitter was a brand new tool or a brand new channel, that's when the idea of being able to listen to these conversations and be able to see what the conversation trends were. What's the volume? What's the sentiment? Who are the influencers driving these conversations, et cetera, ultimately became a really key piece of research that brands needed to be able to understand, okay, well, not only how are people reacting to the social media posts that our brand is putting out there, because around the same time, this is when brands decided, hey, we should leverage this new channel of social media to be able to connect with people. So we need to know whether our content's doing well, first and foremost, but then also understanding what the conversational trends are around your industry, your product category, or just culture in general can help to inform a content writer as to what might resonate well that's relevant to their brand. And so that's where a lot of the insights that I was providing to the Audi team and others would help to make sure that our content performed better on social media. And we grew our audience, right? Then it became about understanding who that audience is. So understanding from the publicly available aggregate level information that is out there, not just what are people saying about our brand or our competitors or our product category, like, cars, et cetera. But who are those people, right? So are they into, outside of the fact that they talk about cars, what else are they into? And so these audience tools are able to then give you the ability to see not just that they follow Audi and they talk about cars, but they also over-index for liking gaming or hiking or cooking or whatever it might be. They also over-index for following other brands. Like they over-index for following PlayStation more than Xbox, right? Or I'm making that up, or Coke more than Pepsi, right? But what you can find very quickly is kind of a persona of your audience on social media. And then that also helps inform your content strategy, right? If you know that there's an affinity for a specific activity or a specific brand, then that can become content that you put out there, as well as maybe even a brand partnership. Right. Oftentimes we see two brands come together and you're like, wow, that's an amazing, little collaboration they did. Where did they come up with that? It probably came from an analysis to say, hey, people who follow our brand also over-index for following this other brand. So we're the perfect match. And then it just kind of evolved from there. Social listening is around what are people saying on social media. Social audience analysis is who are those people. But then there's additional technologies like social influencer vetting tools to be able to tell you that, of the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of influencers and content creators that are out there in the world, what's the short list of 10 that we should reach out to as potential ambassadors for our brand that are going to do a promoted post in collaboration with our brand, right? Did they overlap an audience, right? The target audience we're trying to reach, do they have that audience? Where geographically are they? Does it match where our target is? And then even going so far as to say, like, so when they do work with brands, does their content still perform just as well? Or is it more of they kind of phoned it in and just, held up a product and then, no one really engaged with that post. So they're probably not the right influencer to work with because their performance went down the last time that they partnered with the brand. So there's a lot of things you can do there to kind of provide more insight into which influencers to work with. And then finally, the content performance piece, being able to see how your posts are performing, your top performing posts of a given period versus your lowest performing posts. Why did that post not perform as well? Is there a pattern of low performing posts that we could optimize in the future for new campaigns? But then also benchmarking against competitors to say, DiGiorno, we're outperforming Red Baron on these types of posts, but we're underperforming when they post about this other topic, right? Why did that post do so well by the competitor? What can we learn from that? So there's a lot of broader social intelligence now. It's not just the core social listening tool. It's now you need that core social listening tool, and then you need complementary tools like audience and influencer and content performance tools, et cetera, to build out a social intelligence technology stack that can answer any research question.
Incredible. So is it wrong to assume that the target audience for your social media content is different from your target market person for like a grocery store shopper, as an example? Like, are these two different populations, or have you found that it's really the same consumer?
Yeah, it's a great question. It actually typically is a different audience, usually. And the reason that it's a different audience is because of the way that brands started off on social media. Way back in the day, at the beginning stages of brands joining Facebook and Twitter and other channels, oftentimes it was like, hey, like our page and you get, you enter this sweepstakes for a free product. Or sometimes it wasn't even a free product. It was like an Amazon gift card or whatever it was. And so you get a lot of people that just followed you, and they don't actually care about your brand. And so when you look at analysis of an audience from many years ago, it often doesn't reflect your target audience at all. And so what you really need to do, these tools are smart enough to be able to tell you, okay, let's isolate only those who have engaged with one of our posts over the last 6 months. They've commented on it, they've liked it, they've shared it, whatever it might be, because those are the recent people who are actually showing an indication that they still love your brand, right? And they're the ones that are hopefully reflective of your target audience. But even still, sometimes we find out that when we do analysis for a new brand, okay, well, actually your target audience is very different. So let's find out more about that target audience. And you can plug into these tools like, hey, give me a persona of people in this geographic region of the country that have this demographic profile and have these interests around whatever it might be, cooking or hiking or whatever it is. And then tell me what else they're into. How many of them overlap with our audience? How many of them overlap with our competitors' audience, right? How much are we trying to conquest from our competitor right now? And ultimately, how do we reach them? How do we create content that resonates with them? And so, yeah, it usually is. We usually find out some nuggets of insight that the target audience is different from the general population target audience that the brand strategists have wanted to intend to reach with their broader TV campaigns or whatever.
Absolutely. And I think that sets us up to talk about the difference between qualitative and quantitative research. Like, could you just give a quick distinction for our listeners between those two things?
Yeah, so qualitative research is, of course, understanding the why behind different emotions and different interests, and so you can get a lot of qualitative insight from social media by looking at the word clouds and the phrases that are being talked about the most, and understanding sentiment and things like that. But then, of course, quantitative is going to give you the actual sizing of how large of a conversation is this? And so I think what I love about social intelligence and specifically the social listening piece is that balance of qual and quant. It's almost exactly in the middle. Only looking at the quant to say, hey, there's 3 million conversations about this topic. Like, well, so what? Hey, there's 50% or let's say 65% of the conversation is positive, and 35% of the conversation is negative. Well, okay, but what are people saying that is either positive or negative? You have to go into the qual side of the tool to understand the conversation drivers, who's influential in both the positive and negative conversations, and what's ultimately the themes of conversation coming out of those in order to get to an insight. So that's what I love about it, that it's really it's a combination of qual and quant.
The combination, yeah. It's so fascinating. And a term that you used a moment ago is ethnographic research. And I've heard you talk about Foresight ecosystem. So for those listening that are wondering, like, well, first of all, what is ethnographic research or insights? And, tell us a little bit about these Foresight ecosystems that you're setting up.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I love about my role at Nestle is that I sit within the consumer and marketplace insights team, as opposed to other organizations that will put the social intelligence team or social listener sitting with the social team, and they're only informing the social team of what's going on social media. What I loved about this is that I sit within an insights function. And so my role immediately expands into being able to support brand teams, innovation teams, market researchers, and ultimately Foresight teams. And so the Foresight team at Nestle is now working very closely with me on building out a whole new Foresight ecosystem. What they mean by Foresight is essentially looking 3 to 5 years down the line to be able to say, okay, what are some of the big cultural movements and cultural shifts that we're seeing in consumer behavior that we should be aware of as an organization, right? Those can be anything from, healthy aging or to, holistic health or nostalgia, or there's all these different broad kind of movements that consumers are shifting towards, right? And so what they are building out is kind of that slow culture analysis, and they're using ethnographic studies, which really is just a deep dive into the human condition and understanding, long form conversation to get an understanding of the emotions behind a particular topic. And that what they're doing is they're now using my social intelligence tools and in a whole new complement to what they do, because now they have a view into fast culture. Right? If Foresight is about slow culture, what's moving 3 to 5 years down the line, social intelligence is fast culture. And so what I'm able to provide them with is, hey, here are the trends that are emerging this week or even over the last 24 hours. Right. And so I'm able to show them within the coffee space or the comfort food space or the pizza space or whatever the product category is. I can tell them, okay, here's what's emerging right now. And here's how large of a conversation it is. Here's what's trending. If it's spicy flavors, being an example of there's more just kind of contests on social media about trying different new spicy flavors, right? There's a bunch of those little trends that happen on TikTok and other channels, right? But ultimately, if there's a pattern that's happening around these different small, fast culture trends that are over within 48 hours, right? Well, then the Foresight team might be interested in understanding the why behind that. And what they kind of find is that, okay, there's actually a rise in spicy flavors that the American palate is becoming more into. And ultimately, that could be a signal of the kind of the multicultural cuisines that are being infused in our culture, and it becomes a very interesting conversation about the slow cultural movement of consumer behavior shifts in the food and beverage space, and that can then be taken by the Foresight teams to our marketing analytics team to say, okay, well, which one of our Nestle brands could potentially tap into this, right? Hot Pockets came out with Hot Pockets Hot Ones to partner with Hot Ones, popular YouTube show. Stouffer's came out with their spicy mac and cheese, right? And so these are examples of where the marketing analytics team can then take that insight that came from the fast culture trend and then the slow culture analysis, slow culture movement trends, to be able to say, what's the size of the prize? If we were to come out with a product that was related to that met the moment of this trend, what's the potential revenue here? Right. And so they do their analysis from a revenue perspective, and then we put it on shelves. We see how it does. And that is the full ROI that I can then take to the C-suite and say, actually, our social trends were the initial reason why ultimately that product is on shelves now. So,
is there an example of a product that was released by Nestle that is from that research?
We're in the process of building it, but one of the first ones that we're using as kind of the example is that spicy mac and cheese. That was kind of the first one that we were like, okay, spicy flavors. How does this all connect? And it turned into spicy mac.
So thank you for all of that background. That's really interesting. So for those who are hearing this and thinking, wait a minute, so is social listening somehow spying on me and, reading through my social media posts to try to target market me? And, very often people are like, my phone is listening. Look, it's now popping up these ads for this thing I was just talking about yesterday. I mean, how can you either address that or, calm people down if they're feeling somehow spied on?
Yeah, absolutely. So the most important thing to know about social intelligence tools and social listening and all these different technologies is that it's all based on public information only, and it is pulling in aggregate conversation themes. So a perfect example is that Twitter is wide open, right? X now, but I still call it Twitter, and I probably always will call it Twitter. The entire idea of X or Twitter is to post things out to the world, right? You're tweeting things out for anyone to be able to see it. And so when you do that, that is something that obviously becomes public information. And so all we can see from the social listening tools is if you've used one of the keywords or phrases related to what we're doing research on, then that tweet will come in and we'll see the tweet and we'll see the public handle name and the public bio. That obviously can, people don't use their full names most of the time, or if they do, that's their choice. But Twitter is a very open platform. On the flip side, if you're to quell any concerns, Facebook is one of the most closed platforms when it comes to social listening, and it's correctly and intentionally closed. When you post on Facebook, the intention is for that to go to your friends group. Right. So it is a closed wall where only your friends are seeing it. And so we can't see any of that. And I don't want to see any of that. Right. I have to make sure that the tools I'm using are compliant with the, broader Nestle policies and every and the industry policies. Right. Make sure everything is only publicly available information. But Facebook is a good example where if I said on Facebook right now, my personal Facebook page, I love Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola can't see that. No one can see that except for my friend group. If I was to comment on Coca-Cola's post and say, hey, I love your product, yes, that comment only becomes public because obviously your intention there is to have Coca-Cola see it because you've commented on their post. Right. So it's kind of that nuance of like, if you're actively commenting on a brand's page, if you're tagging in a brand, things like that, the intention is that you want the brand to see it. Right. But if you're posting something to just your friends, that is not seen. So don't have any concerns about that. It's more about, the nature of the either public or private nature of that particular social media channel. That's how, and everything that we do is just publicly available information that we're researching.
Thank you for explaining that. But for those who are concerned about the thing popping up on their phone, is that something different?
Yes, it's completely different. I work strictly within conversation analysis and what's called organic social conversation. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't even tell you why,
You're clearly very generous. You've just helped us to understand this complicated capability in organizations that's wildly important and necessary and thoughtful. So even just the way you're talking about people's privacy and the curiosity that you have around people's buying habits and what they're interested in and how they're feeling about something, I interpret that as a very generous act. Just curious to get your thoughts on where else do you see generosity at work, or even how do you see social intelligence as a generous capability? Yeah, just your thoughts on generosity at work would be great.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, when I think of generosity at work, I immediately think of the gift of your time. Everyone's got so many different things to do. We've got our massive to-do list and our email inbox, and we've got our reports we need to write and our deliverables and all the meetings that we have that are put on our calendars. And then at the same time, we sometimes have colleagues from either inside or outside of our organization that also say, hey, we'd love to talk to you. We'd love to grab coffee. We'd love to just, hop on a Teams or Zoom or whatever, just to, get your advice on, learning more about what you do, or I'm not sure what my next career path is and things like that. Saying yes to that and saying, yeah, absolutely. Happy to tell you more about what I do. I'm happy to give you some guidance on where you might be able to fit within our organization or maybe elsewhere. Those are the types of things that are invaluable. And ultimately, I think of it as kind of, it's an extension of the golden rule, right? Treat others as you want to be treated, right? If I am struggling and trying to learn something new, or I'm looking for career advice on next career path, and I reach out to someone, especially someone that is higher up than me within an organization that I see as a potential mentor, right? I want them to say yes and be able to give me, 20, 30 minutes of their time. And so just by always trying my best to say yes, as long as I'm not, over-committing myself to the point where my family life suffers, right? Spending all weekend answering those types of calls isn't good for my 8-year-old and my 6-year-old and my wife. So they need to have my time too, right? So as long as you're keeping that balance, and that ultimately that balance is part of generosity. I need to be generous with my time with my family too. But as long as you're keeping that balance, then say yes to those conversations as much as you can, because ultimately you're helping someone, and who knows, it might come back in a moment, that you don't even know years down the road where, there's an opportunity that comes your way because you helped someone before. So.
Oh, without a doubt. Oh, thank you for that. That's such a great answer, and the thought for us to say yes, as long as it's not saying no to ourselves or other things that really matter to us. But when people need our support, they need somebody to talk to or vent or help, that we need to make ourselves available. And I agree, time is such a precious resource, and making that available for people is really generous. And how do you see the return on that generosity? You alluded to it a moment ago, but curious to get your thoughts, Frank, on where do you see the return on generosity?
Yeah, I mean, I think that ultimately it kind of goes back to the origin story I mentioned earlier with my friend Joe. He had a few years experience in the workforce before he joined grad school at VCU. So he was a little bit older than me at the time. I was fresh out of undergrad, but I was a year ahead of him in school. So they assigned a mentee to every second year. And so he was my mentee. And so I was guiding him through like, all right, so here's what the classes are like. Here's what the professors are like. And you're going to do great, and kind of helping and guide him through that. And I mean, I think the return on generosity is that we've continued to help each other in our careers throughout. And sure enough, a few years later, he's shot up through the ranks at an agency. He needs someone to try out this new capability. And he said, "You're a smart guy. You can do it." And give me a shot. So I think it just, the return on generosity is that you don't know exactly where and when the return is going to be, but, giving of yourself to others, it ultimately could lead to something later on. And if it doesn't, that's fine too.
Sure. Yeah. Right. Like that's what I'm clearly hearing in what you're saying, Frank, is it's that you weren't giving to get something, but the fact is it was just a joy to be helpful to him at that time. And you made a genuine friendship, and you were naturally encouraging to him, and that was helpful. And then that actually had a direct reciprocity, which doesn't always happen, but that's a great story. I love that. So I'm going to do my best to attempt to recap some of the takeaways that our listeners can apply to their own lives. They may not ever become social intelligence experts, and they might not even totally understand all that we've just talked about. But there's a lot that you said that we could apply, and then would love to get anything else that you want to add. So one of the things that you said early on was do your research. And I think that's true for all of us. Just like whatever it is that you're engaging in, do your research, do your homework. Take a shot on someone, like your Joe story. We all have opportunities to give people a break or see what they can do. Know your audience. I mean, that's something that you do every day. But for all of us to really understand, who are we serving and how can we know them even better? And how can we even anticipate some of the things that they're going to need and try to find ways to solve for that? And then you did talk about balance earlier, and then just again recently, but you were talking about the qualitative and quantitative research balance. And I think that applies to all of us as generous leaders, of just like looking for, too much of any one thing is not good. So how do we balance out the things that we're responsible for, making time for people, saying yes and making time for people. And then of course, practice the golden rule. What a brilliant way to be a generous leader, is to treat others the way you want to be treated. Is there anything else you would add to that, Frank?
Yeah, I think that sums it up pretty well. The only thing that I would add to it is just have a natural curiosity, right? A lot of times, when it's either myself or one of my stakeholders that I'm supporting within an organization will just say like, hey, are people talking about this on social media? Like, is this a thing or that maybe could be an opportunity for us? And it's just, I love those types of questions because it's like, yeah, let me check it out. Right. And so all of a sudden it's a whole new topic that I'm analyzing. And so just being curious. And if you're a researcher, you naturally should be curious, right? But if you are a leader in an organization, asking those types of questions, if you've got a good research team, they are going to love those types of questions, because it gives them the ability to just kind of go down a rabbit hole and find out a whole new subtopic, subculture, whatever it might be. So,
absolutely, and it could be the spark that starts a fire. A good fire. Yes. Well, thank you for spending your sacred time with us. We so appreciate your willingness to share, and we are cheering you on, Frank. Thanks for doing what you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Shannon. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to R.O.G. Return on Generosity podcast. Please help us grow by subscribing and reviewing us on your favorite podcast player. And for more information, visit bridgebetween.com. We grow when we give.
우리는 나누면서 성숙합니다.
We grow when we give.
On rayonne quand on donne.
We grow when we give.